Hello and welcome to This Week at the Movies. I'm Matt.
And I'm Eric.
And this week we have tons to talk about, a couple of big releases from this first weekend in April. And we will be looking back at the way March ended with Godzilla and King Kong making a return. Eric, it's been a big time for movies. You saw a bunch of films to get ready for this week. Are you excited?
Yeah, I'm ready for these weeks at the movies today. Yeah.
Yeah.
Although I have a feeling that the first Omen is trying to kick me off of my internet to keep me from tearing it to shreds. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, maybe, with both the first Omen and with Godzilla X Kong, we will be talking about links to a larger cinematic franchise. Um, Also, ironic for the first Omen that 2 weeks in a row we got films about American ingenues going to Italy, despite not speaking Italian, to take their vows only to become impregnated by the spawn of the devil. But, these things come in waves, I assume. I can't wait to see what opens next weekend that I'm not aware of. But we're going to kick off with what some people have called the Indian John Wick. I don't know if that even does enough justice to it. And that is the new film Monkey Man from Dev Patel. And this is clearly Dev Patel's passion project. He came up with the screen story, co-wrote the screenplay, was the director, and is the star. Also produced by Jordan Peele, who did Get Out and Nope, and and Us. I knew it had a one-word title that I just wasn't latching onto. I could picture the trailer. I had a poster that looked a lot like Monkey Man with the kind of red and black motif. It was actually ironic. Both of our major releases this week had almost eerily similar trailer or eerily similar marketing profiles. Very different films though. This one, we start with a young boy and his mother, and she's telling him the story of this, monkey warrior. And you can tell that they have a very close bond and that something not great is going to happen. We flash forward years later and we're introduced to this boy grown up now in an underground fighting ring. Charlotte Copley is there as kind of the shady promoter down in India. He's adopted this monkey persona, but he's really just using it as a means to an end. Soon he finds a job in a place that kind of serves the criminal underworld, all of it as a means to make a connection, to get him closer to the man who defined his life. And we see in flashbacks a little bit about their incident from the past. There are a whole lot of other things going on here, a whole lot of cultural things. They aren't really concerned with building a lot of depth of character, to the point that I'm going to ask you, Eric, do you know what Dev Patel's character's name is?
So I have thoughts on that because Hanuman.
I don't think no, that's not what's listed. What's actually
it's not
listed,
actually.
yeah, what's actually listed is his character is called Kid.
Yeah, but that's the thing in the tradition of like Fight Club and like that there are a few movies like The Man with No Name. I felt like that was a very pointed thing to have him just be like almost not a person in and of himself, but that he was hollowed out and become a vessel to be this monkey man.
And it's what we get is a very action oriented film, a lot of big fight sequences, a lot of pretty impressive action. I was very taken with Dev Patel. I don't think I've ever seen him in anything quite like this. He plays a lot of more demure characters, even from Slumdog Millionaire, The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel, the kind of son in Lion with Nicole Kidman. He was on Newsroom, Aaron Sorkin's TV show. He played David Copperfield in the new version of David Copperfield from Armando Iannucci. But I really loved this. I liked the action. I thought it was really satisfying. I'm giving it a one thumb up.
Yeah, I agree with you and your review that you did of this a couple of days ago that it's Dev Patel proving he can make a really solid movie. And so he proved he can successfully make this kind of movie. But what comes with that is a lot of tropes like shallow characters, hanging up the phone without signing off, having excessive flashbacks to a tragic backstory and that kind of stuff. But to come out for your first effort and prove you can do that well with the challenges that he faced and putting himself so physically into it, I was absolutely blown away. Like I was so happy to see this. It was so satisfying to see something this hard hitting. And there's a lot to it. I saw this with my wife. There's a lot to it that I didn't understand. That this is a very potentially pointed political movie about things that are going on in Indian culture, with there being this like underbelly that's sort of caught in between Hindu and Muslim like prejudice that comes from the people who are in power, and like it's almost there's a lot that can be taken away from the movie, or you can take it as the story as it is. And I really appreciate when a movie walks that line really well. I'm giving it a full 2 thumbs up, but I think that other people may not like. There's some of it that's hard to stomach. I think it goes far.
It's not a happy story, and
No,
some of it is, some of it's quite graphic. But if you like action films, you will be down with this. I agree. There's a lot of political things going on, including the group that harbors the kid as he's recovering. You know, but the movie, it doesn't. While it brings up these issues, it didn't feel like it totally wanted to comment on
no. The only
it.
big commentary is this idea of it is time to take down the oppressive establishment, which is this and another movie we're going to talk about. It's not saying anything new, but there is something cool to me. One, the action in this is extremely satisfying. Just the upscale and like when it needs to hit hard, when the main character needs to struggle, and when he needs to be really powerful on screen is like really great. But I think there's something about Dev Patel making this movie where he is a hero who takes on the establishment or whatever, while he in real life is making a movie that sends a pretty pointed message to an establishment, is kind of like it has a foot in reality. And so I think it gives it kind of an edge where normally I would just be like, this is just a well-made version of just another action movie. It just has a tiny step towards having more purpose. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's been interesting. Patel has done quite a few projects that have really tried to depict modern India at the time, too, or Indian culture and celebration. Even I would even say those the 2 Best Exotic Marigold Hotel films give you a sense of the country and its people in some way, even though they're radically different films. When you have Judi Dench and Maggie Smith looking for a place to retire, that's not quite the same as this all-out action onslaught. It did make me want to watch Slumdog Millionaire again. I forget that movie is like 16 years old now. I mean, it doesn't feel like it was that long ago, but I know time is passing rapidly. Well, I like to think of this week's episode as kind of an Oreo with sadness in the middle, because I like our first movie and I like our third movie. The middle movie was not as great, and that is the first Omen. You know how all these people look confused in this picture or bored, just outright bored? That was probably me for the first half of this film. The First Omen is a prequel to the classic film The Omen, which starred Gregory Peck and came out in 1976. This one takes the action back to 1971 in Rome, where we have a young officiate named Margaret who arrives. She's been a ward of the church her entire life, but you're given to believe at the beginning that she's American, although I was dubious. And, kindly old Bill Nye, who is either really kind or devilish, is there. And given his presence, I knew which way I was going with that. drops her off at this orphanage where she's going to be working until she takes her vows. She's instantly drawn to a child that reminds her of herself, who has these strange demonic visions and seems to be perpetually abused and segregated by the people that control the facility. She's then approached by a kindly priest who says he was excommunicated, sure wears the collar a lot, who had been part of an opening sequence with Charles Dance that was memorable, to say the least. He tells her that this is a secret sect within the church who's trying to birth the Antichrist so that they can control him, because that's sure a great idea based on their not really understanding the scripture they read clearly. But hey, anything's possible, I guess. And employs young Margaret to try to find the person that they might be using as a vessel for this unholy child. I wonder who this vessel might be.
Gee, it's like the end of the movie thinks that you don't know and is going to name drop this big twist on you.
So, I'm going to be honest. There was one thing that occupied a lot of my time in the first part of the movie, and that's because the actress that played Margaret looked really familiar to me and looked like I had seen her oppression and consternation face before, but I just couldn't place it. And so I spent a lot of time trying to remember where I'd seen her, and then finally put together that she was the Lannister daughter in Game of Thrones. And I was like, I have seen her oppression and consternation face before. And that fortunately kept me going, because the first half of this movie is insanely boring. Maybe the first 2/3 of this movie is kind of dry and boring. It's fine in the way it's put together. The least surprising reveal in the history of time is Margaret's connection to this whole thing, and where we're ultimately leading with this whole thing. If you've ever seen the film The Omen, which they make that connection implicitly clear at the end with a file that gets opened and a picture of Gregory Peck there. But I actually kind of liked the third act a little bit, because it was weird and kind of wild and went in some weird and wild directions I wasn't expecting, which is almost, I'm going to say, I made a joke at the beginning, but literally Neon's Immaculate, which opened on March 29th, 7 days prior to this, is about an American who goes to Italy to take her vows and joins a convent and gets impregnated. It wasn't the Antichrist per se, it was them trying to resurrect Jesus through the womb, but having it turn out to be the devil. It's essentially the same plot line, leading to two of the most horrendous birth sequences of all time. If I hadn't just seen Immaculate the week before, I might have been even a little kinder to the first Omen, because of that kind of creepy third act. And there were some moments in the middle that were kind of stylistic flourishes that were okay. But it's just not great. As my wife says, I watched some weird crap. And this definitely qualified. I hope they're not planning to make a franchise, although the way this one ends, as much as I'm going to say I sort of enjoyed where they went with the third act and the three Chinatown-esque pairing at the end, where she's my sister, she's my daughter, she's, if you follow the logic of the film's child creation, setting that aside, the very ending of it kind of makes you feel like they're trying to build some new franchise, which I also don't know how that happens unless you're trying to pick up immediately after the events of the film The Omen, which could be possible. I am giving this one thumbs neutral. I didn't hate it, but I didn't think it was good either.
I would have been neutral. Then I thought about it. I have a question for you. Then I'm going to tell you if I think this movie was made, and then I have another question for you. Okay?
Yeah.
My question: how can something with this much wailing choir music and jump scares be this boring?
It is really dry. I wish this movie was 90 minutes instead of 120 minutes.
Yeah. And So here's how I think this movie was made. Oh man, we're Disney. We bought Fox. What are these things that Fox owns? Well, they've got the Omen franchise, so we have to do something with that. We could do. Some guy has this idea for a script with a prequel. A prequel, so it's just like what? How the kid is born? Yeah. Okay, screw it. Make it. Let's see what happens. Hey, the director really likes Rosemary's Baby and wants to try to make it like a 60s thriller movie. Okay, well, what are the things that everyone knows from The Omen? Well, a dude gets his head cut off at a construction site, and a lady says it's all for you and jumps off and gets hung. Okay, well, just make sure those two things are in there, and then he can do a Rosemary's Baby thing. And then they were like, hey, we just screen tested this with an audience and they think the ending is really painful and boring because it's just the birth of the baby. Well, we want it to potentially be a franchise, so throw another baby in there. And I think that's the whole story of how the movie was made.
It would make some sense maybe if they tacked on that ending, because then Ralph Innocent's character comes back and looks like he's actually rejoined the priesthood, because Catholics notoriously are lax on reversing excommunications.
Sure.
But
So,
obviously his character is in The Omen, so we knew he was going to survive.
so here's my other question for you. The entire premise of this movie is based around the Catholic Church needs some sort of evil in order to scare people into going back to the church. Maybe after the third baby, where they have a demon jackal in their basement, they would have thought, why don't we just show people that we found a demon jackal?
Or, I mean, Margaret was attempt number 5, and what's her name is attempt number 14. It looks like they just did it once a year for 14 years, and then
Without thinking, maybe the literal demon that we found would be proof. Like, what was that? Everyone is talking as if like everything about the demon is like, well, of course. Like, nobody acknowledges that in this gritty, grounded, real, practical world, they've got a demon in the basement. And it doesn't do anything. It drove me crazy.
Or that, much like European royal dynasties in the 1700s, the only way they could get the child they wanted was through at least one generation of inbreeding.
Yeah. So
you're like,
okay,
cool.
Everything about the pre-production, I think, was awful. Everything about the actual filming of the movie, I think, was great. It was very beautiful, and I liked the style. Everything with the post-production and editing and whatever studio notes was hot garbage. One thumb down.
Yeah, and I don't need any more Omen movies. This is a good segue into the franchise. There are a whole lot of, much like when we talked about The Exorcist, there's The Exorcist, and then there's a whole bunch of like sequels and prequels and tie-ins. The Omen has that too. They also have 2 versions. The OG version here with charming young Damien surviving is 1976 with Gregory Peck. Then on June 6th, 2006, we got a just straight remake with Liev Schreiber and Julia Stiles. That was just basically doing The Omen over again. And I'm going to be honest, I've seen both of them. I have not watched all the other Omen sequels. I actually like the 2006 one, I think, better than the 1976 one. Though I wouldn't say either of them are incredible. And I don't feel like, there are some horror franchises that have remained popular and seem to have like a fan base that people are really into it. I think even The Exorcist has maintained a better cultural presence and popularity even after the abomination we saw in the fall. than the Omen. I don't feel like there was like all these Omen heads out there like, when are we going to get back to this? This is our jam.
Right. And then it just felt like they put such little care into the story for this on top of that. Like, why did they make this movie?
Bill, we were all wondering how little Damien was born. I
Oh,
don't think
right.
I could have slept at night not knowing. But this is the other thing. I felt like in the original Omen, they make some kind of allusion to the idea that she died giving birth, but maybe that's just because they thought she died. Is what they're telling you. I don't know.
Because they do the thing where they light their own building on fire and they don't even bother to check if the fire went out to see that the body's missing.
Well, and also, how are they? They just let the corpse of Bill Nye's character was some kind of pretty high up cardinal in the organization. How exactly were they explaining his? And also, Sonia Braga is a somewhat well known actress who is given no role here. I mean, no character depth, no. At least like the Mother Superior and Immaculate gets like a grim fight sequence. With
Cool.
Sydney Sweeney. But I never thought we were going to have back-to-back weeks where this would literally be the plot of movies. Welcome to America in 2024. This is like the Armageddon and what was the
Deep Impact.
Deep Impact that no one asked for.
Hercules and the Legend of Hercules, or yeah, it happens every the bit like A Bug's Life and Ants.
I mean, Neon is pretty much geniuses because they got out first and they have a bigger star. Because that's the other thing. There's no one in this Omen prequel. They're expecting the franchise to be the draw.
Yeah.
And I don't know that it's the kind of franchise that has that draw.
No.
Well, before we get out of here, we want to turn to the big release from Easter weekend, and that was, the very reverent pairing of two of our greatest heroes, Godzilla and King Kong. This marks, so I think the beginning of the MonsterVerse. That film was 2014, I believe. So it's been 10 years now. And so Godzilla X Kong, the dawn of a new empire. This one takes place a little bit after Godzilla versus Kong. Kong is spending most of his time in the Hollow Earth looking for possible family. Rebecca Hall is back with her daughter, who is the last surviving member of the Iwi tribe. We get a steady dose of Dan Stevens, which was a welcome addition, and they bring back Brian Tyree Henry, even though I don't recall him having any interactions with Rebecca Hall in Godzilla versus Kong, where he spent all of his time with Millie Bobby Brown, who did not get invited back. I also feel like Rebecca Hall's character in Godzilla versus Kong was part of Apex and not part of Monarch, but now she's a senior representative of Monarch. So I know they're not expecting you to care about these continuity, and I don't let that distract me in too harsh of terms, but I did have some questions. This is a franchise that makes no mistake that the real star and the real draw is Godzilla and King Kong, and the human characters don't matter that much other than, can you give me a couple of jokes and a couple of emotional beats? And you know what? The quartet that they have in here, chef's kiss on doing that. I also liked some of the action here. We see these guys after a protracted setup getting paired up and fighting a freeze monster that apparently caused the Ice Age, and a hidden evil ape king. There was some other magic that went on. If it sounds confusing, me describing the plot, I don't think these are movies that you're really supposed to follow the plot, other than the monsters battled and the hero monsters came out on top. And you know what? It worked for me. I had a good time with this. I'll give it one thumb up. you'll realize how good a time I had with this when we talk about our rankings for the now 5 film franchise. Um, but I liked it for what it was. I actually had more fun than I was expecting to have. Uh, and if you just give in, I thought Dan Stevens was a great addition. I enjoyed his character a lot. I enjoyed Brian Tyree Henry in this, and there was just enough emotional mother daughter kind of resonance from Rebecca Hall and her ward that I got what I was looking for. Also, Kong adopts like a baby monkey. That was kind of cute in its own way.
Okay. I'm not gonna be the buzzkill here. I will say I do think these movies are written with the set pieces in mind first and just string along whatever in between to make him get from one to the other. I think most of the human characters are just turned into exposition machines with just barely characterization to give them a costume that makes them look different from one another. And Dan Stevens, fine. I thought he was great. Rebecca Hall, great. And again, I do think that core bit of her with the mother-daughter sort of relationship worked, yeah, well enough. I really liked what they did with Kong in this movie. I like the idea of him wandering on his own, discovering his people, wanting to do more. I kind of wish it was just a Kong movie. Like, why have the last 2 entries be Godzilla and Kong again, like back to back? Like, why not let your universe breathe? Because I think Godzilla seems as faceless and needless, other than the cute thing where he sleeps in the Coliseum. I thought that was amazing.
Yeah. Well, and actually, they keep saying he's their like protector up there, but they have not met a major city that he can't destroy.
Right. It was
I
just like have a movie where Godzilla is the surface world's protector and have it be about Monarch and all that, and you can have Kurt Russell be in it and that, and have a Kong movie that's below the earth where you talk about that lost tribe and the little girl from Godzilla and Kong, and then have the Kong movie be like, oh, we awakened something that caused the Ice Age. And then you don't even have to make all these string along excuse scenes in between them. You can just have one big movie where it's just a big monster brawl.
Well, and that's where I got confused with the, what they created Monarch, and we saw Apex in Godzilla versus Kong, and the entire reason that Monarch, a Legacy of Monsters, exists is to bridge to show you how Apex got created, and you leave that series with Apex on Skull Island, clearly the ones that are running Kong. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes it confusing when this pops up. And I guess because Apex got destroyed in Godzilla versus Kong because they made
Godzilla.
Mecha Godzilla. I don't know. At some point in time, I guess you just have to let it go. Plot. I do agree with you. It was more of a King Kong movie, and maybe that's why they pull in, because Rebecca Hall and her daughter's character were definitely more strongly associated and wedded to Kong because their introduction came in that second Kong film. But it's weird because they've cycled through characters. For me, the two that I think when you go through my ranking of the franchise, what has separated some of the movies for me is when they can make some kind of emotional connection that I'm invested also in the human characters. And this one did that for me a little bit better than several of the ones in the past.
But I'll say one huge ding I have against this movie is I think one of the things that worked really well emotionally in what I think is both of our top ranking for this franchise is Mothra. And for this movie to just have this weird subplot where it's like, let's create Mothra as if it's this totally different monster we've never seen before, and then have that.
Yeah, like Mothra got rebirthed.
It was very weird.
It was very weird. What I might have missed it. What did you give this one?
Oh, I I give it a thumbs down. I think that people could do massively better with these characters and these franchises. And for them to keep just making enough money to keep making more of them, I feel like you owe your audience a little bit better than what that work is you're putting into these.
So, as I mentioned, this is the 5th film in the franchise. We had Godzilla 2014, Kong Skull Island 2017, Godzilla King of the Monsters 2019, Godzilla versus Kong in 2021, and now Godzilla x Kong, the Dawn of a New Empire. So, Eric, I'm going to let you go first. Why don't you give us your 5 to 1?
Sure. Okay. Well, so starting at the bottom, 5, there is kind of a tie, but I'm going to say it's Skull Island, because that movie is so like fractured and lost and separated that characters literally teleport on screen in some sequences because of the editing being so fragmented. Like, there not a lot of characterization, there's not a lot of memorable things. It was surprisingly underwhelming for how colorful and exciting it looked in the trailers. And I like Tom Hiddleston and I like Brie Larson well enough and John Goodman, and like, I'm just so interested in things that they could have done in that movie, and like what happens to Samuel L. Jackson and like all this stuff. Like, it just clunks its way through. Like, I think it's very broken. But number 4 then I think has to be Godzilla versus Kong. That movie is just my number 4. It's like the one piece of credit I'll give it is they gave you a clear winner before they did the cliche where they brought out a common bad guy so they worked together. But that's all I got for it. I'm like neutral on that movie. Well, I guess so. I'm neutral on both of these movies then, because the next is Godzilla x Kong, which again I just think they're just like serviceable visually, and the rest of it kind of tossed together. Anyways, so that makes number 3 Godzilla.
Number 2.
Number 2 Godzilla 2014. I do think that they should have. It's the thing where these movies don't do as well with the human characters. It kind of undercuts a lot of the emotion of the movie. But the things with Bryan Cranston worked, and I love. Oh no, I'm forgetting it. Ken Watanabe. I love him in these movies, and he is actually probably the reason why my number 1 is Godzilla King of the Monsters. And like his moment where he does his like sacrifice, and it just pays a glint of homage to the original point of the Godzilla character, and there's some heart there, and Millie Bobby Brown is great, and like I don't really care too much about the twists and turns with the mom in that movie with Vera Farmiga, but the action felt like it had weight and emotional consequence, and the characters felt like they had the most emotional consequence. Kyle Chandler and everyone, like, so eventually they just kind of like become not important, and that's a problem I think with all of these movies, is the humans become not important. But yeah, ultimately I think that's my favorite one.
Yeah, and that's somewhat been my criticism. I often wonder, did they imagine they were going to be making this large interconnected universe when they made the first 3 films? Because you could easily watch Godzilla 14, which very little carries forward, especially from the main characters you're supposed to be investing in, into any. Aaron Taylor Johnson and Elizabeth Olsen went on to be super siblings, one of whom died in Wachovia. Yeah, but what was it, Wachovia or Sokovia? It's really sad that I forgot about that for a minute. Which also is the other reason that when you see them then as husband and wife, doesn't totally work. Doesn't it doesn't hit the same. which I think that movie actually came out first, so you would think the other way around. Creepy, but what are you gonna do? So for me, number five, I also have Kong Skull Island, which by far has the most loaded cast. I mean, you have Samuel L. Jackson, John Goodman, Tom Hiddleston, John C. Riley, Brie Larson, Toby Kebbell is in there. I mean, it's got a great loaded cast. It's got some great character actors. It has all the pieces that could make it really fun. This kind of like post Vietnam, almost a little bit of uh, Heart of Darkness thing going on in some of the shots and the way that that air cavalry is driving in there. It just doesn't. I mean, it's fine. I don't dislike it. I just, when I'm thinking about the other ones, it doesn't do. Just a little bit of a rung above for me is the original Godzilla 2014. I actually liked what they were starting to do with that story, but they kind of start to have this father son thing and dispatch with Bryan Cranston a little too quickly, just the same way that they were kind of having he's doing this for his wife, but you didn't get enough of Juliette Binoche in the beginning, and you have Juliette Binoche, and you do it for 5 minutes, and it does have a particularly poignant emotional scene, and there are some about the visuals and the way Gareth Edwards puts this together that I liked, but you're following Aaron Johnson a lot of the time, and he keeps just surviving one unbelievably tense thing to another, and then they're going to fight all these other titans. It just doesn't all quite come together. Number three for me is Godzilla versus Kong, which I was happy to have Kyle Chandler and Millie Bobby Brown back, but justice for Kyle Chandler, who is given nothing to do pretty much in this sequel film.
Before I forget, can I mention one weird thing about that movie?
Yeah.
That Kyle Chandler lives in the same cabin as Tony Stark. But this movie came out and I forgot to point that out.
It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, same shooting location. Anyways.
But I mean, it doesn't really have a lot to do. And Millie Bobby Brown's storyline with Brian Tyree Henry and her little friend there is mostly weird until it kind of ties back to the end. But so too is what Alexander Skarsgård and Rebecca Hall are doing, because there's just a lot of complex things until you realize that even though this movie is billed about these two titans doing battle, it's really going to be about them fighting Mecha Godzilla. That kind of detracts. There are some fun visual sequences. I didn't mind it. It was actually a movie we probably needed at the time that it came out, because it was right in the middle of that pandemic, and it was something like fun blockbustery you could watch. I remember getting released at home. But then number two for me is actually Godzilla X Kong, because I thought it was more focused, and without having 2 or 3 different teams of humans that were pretending to care about, we had one group that was a good time. I really liked Stan Stevens. He brought a madcap, strange energy, and we are about to see a ton of him, because he is in Abigail and he steals that trailer, and he is in Cuckoo and he looks crazy in that trailer as well. It could be a big year for Dan Stevens Hyde out there, especially those of us that saw him go off the chain in Legion. I'm here for it. Rebecca Hall and her little Iwi daughter. There were some beautiful moments there. And Kong and his little adopted mini Kong. There were some emotional moments, and the fighting sequence worked well enough for me. But number one for me is same as you. It's Godzilla King of the Monsters, although it seems like possibly for a different reason. It's because I really was invested in the family, Kyle Chandler and Vera Farmiga and Millie Bobby Brown, and their back and forth. I also thought that had some beautiful and stunning visuals, the way the monsters come up and the way you have some of these monster battles in there and the scope of everything. I enjoyed the heck out of that movie, and it kind of amused me a little bit that that's, for a lot of people, they're by far their least favorite, which feels weird to me. I have always liked that one the best. I just watched all 4 of them over again going into Godzilla X Kong, and then still I'm like, yeah, this is the best one.
Other than Kong himself, I can't imagine what people got out of this new movie that you don't get out of King of the Monsters slightly better.
Yeah, I mean the emotional beats, the father, son, mother, daughter. I mean the family dynamics, the self-sacrifice. They blew up Fenway Park. I mean, it had everything you could have been looking for. Someday they'll catch them all. I'm like you though. I don't know that we need another one. In fact, I was kind of surprised when I saw Godzilla X Kong on, but then I had a decent time with it. So I guess they probably will make more because it made quite a bit of money. I would have bet money that I would enjoy Ghostbusters Frozen Empire more than Godzilla X Kong, and that did not turn out to be the case for me, which was probably the most surprising outcome of March. And then the most surprising outcome of April so far is that, unwanted demon pregnancies are a thing at the movie theaters this year. So,
If we get one more this year, then we know something weird is going on.
We don't totally know the plot for our film we're going to look at next week, Civil War. So,
Hey,
fingers crossed. This is the trilogy we never knew we needed. Now, I am excited for Alex Garland's Civil War. Some very mixed and polarizing early results, but I am fascinated to see where we go with that. A very interesting visual filmmaker. We will talk about some of his films. And then going to be, a big month. We have a new Guy Ritchie film coming later this month, and Luca Guadagnino's Challengers coming out at the end of the month. So a lot of fun things coming here in April to look forward to, but that'll do it for us this week. I think if there's anything to take away from this episode, it's if you are a young American girl who gets invited to Italy to take your vows with the Catholic Church, just say no. Otherwise, you will give birth to the Antichrist. And until then, we'll see you guys at the movie.